Thank you, Sivia, and welcome everybody. Appreciate you joining us for another Fugue Lunch and Learn, where we take a deep dive into one of the many use cases of Fugue for preventing the kinds of misconfigurations and cloud vulnerabilities that hackers use, not only to gain initial penetration into an environment, but then leverage the APIs and other kind of resource graph kind of vulnerabilities in your environment to start operating against your control plane to discover resources, move laterally, extract data very quickly and often without detection. So we at Fugue believe that cloud security is really all about prevention and secure design, as opposed to kind of the traditional security techniques and approaches that we saw in the data center, like intrusion detection and network security, which really don't apply in the cloud. So it's really all about prevention. And we do that primarily by helping you really understand your environment, give you full knowledge of your environment, where you're vulnerable to these kinds of modern cloud attacks, and prevent those kinds of vulnerabilities by empowering developers to design secure environments and automatically preventing the deployment of these kinds of vulnerabilities and misconfigurations in CI/CD. So that brings us to our topic today. Specifically, we're going to be looking at integrating Fugue with AWS CodePipeline, with AWS CloudFormation as the infrastructure as code example. Before we get started, just wanted to again, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining, and want to invite you to participate at any time during this session. We'd love to hear your comments, questions, suggestions in the chat. So please do utilize the chat feature at any time. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat along with my colleague here, Sivia, so we can kind of let Aidan continue with his presentation and not get distracted. And we will, at the proper times, kind of jump in and pose questions to Aidan along the way. So without further ado, let's get on with this. Let me introduce Aidan O'Connor, Senior Solutions Engineer here at Fugue. Hey, Aidan, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, Drew. Thanks for asking. Yeah, it's I'm here at the Fugue Washington D.C. office, and I was able to walk to work in t-shirt and shorts today. It was a beautiful day this morning. What's up?
It's been a long, cold winter, so it's a nice change.
As recently as this weekend where it snowed. So yeah,
right. Definitely. We went from blizzard to like springtime in DC pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So thanks, Drew, and thanks, Sivia, for helping out with this and setting this up. So as Drew and Sivia were saying, this is the third lunch and learn I'm doing. First one I did on, I think, Bitbucket pipelines. The second one I did on GitLab pipelines. And then today we're going to be focusing on AWS CodePipeline. The other thing that we're changing up today is I've done a lot of Terraform. Got some requests to do CloudFormation because that's definitely up and coming as an infrastructure as code language. So I did CloudFormation today. So CloudFormation, as everyone here probably knows, you have a couple options. So JSON or YAML. I stuck with YAML today, just personal preference. But just for everyone's awareness, Fugue does scan Kubernetes manifests, JSON and YAML, both CloudFormation and Terraform, both HCL code and Terraform JSON plans. And then Azure Resource Manager is something recently added as a, I think, only JSON, and it's in preview right now. So we're working our way into bringing that out into GA. So without further ado, I'll get into the presentation here. So I've got about 45 minutes of slides, and then I'll do just a quick demo at the end. I'm kidding, of course. So I'll kick it off today. We'll just do a overview of Fugue in today's use case, in case anyone is not familiar with Fugue. Go over some prerequisites for how you can follow along and go put this into action later on today. And then we're going to look at the purposefully vulnerable CloudFormation that I've included in this repository. Then we'll kick off a build. We'll resolve some misconfigurations. I'll show you where you could deploy. I won't be deploying this cloud infrastructure today. And then save some time at the end for some Q&A. I'm going to go over quickly the Fugue platform. So when we talk about cloud security, a lot of people start here. So once it's deployed, once it being cloud infrastructure is deployed, you then maybe wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat thinking, it was maybe a little bit too easy to create that S3 bucket. So this is where a lot of people start. And then we like to recommend that you keep that up, but then you also shift left or extend left really to scanning your IaC. So you could do that Fugue. You could do that with our open source tool as well, Regula. And then the best way to make this a complete picture is to integrate it into a CI/CD pipeline. And so like the one we'll talk about today, which is AWS CodePipeline. But just keep in mind that anything you see here today can be done with any other CI/CD tool. So in fact, I'm taking requests for the next Lunch and Learn. So if you have a CI/CD pipeline tool that is not GitLab pipelines, Bitbucket pipelines, or AWS CodePipeline, put it in the chat, and the one with the most amount of thumbs up will be what we'll do next. So finally, the thing that unites all of these with Fugue is our unified policy engine. So all of our rules apply or can apply where they do. So for example, some rules will only apply to IaC, some only apply to runtime. But if a rule is able to apply to IaC or runtime resources, we are the only platform that has a unified policy engine with standard compliance families. And this is all written in Rego, which is the open policy agent policy language. And then finally, as you'll see today, for just a couple of minutes, we have this great cloud resource data engine that comes with Fugue, where you can see the misconfigurations in your environment. And then, so the last thing here, so this is the symbol for AWS CodePipeline. Keep in mind, this can be applied to any CI/CD pipeline. So for today, a couple things you'll need. So obviously an AWS account. I went full AWS today. So I did a code commit IaC repository. My steps for the pipeline are declared in code build. Something I'd recommend is making sure you have the CloudWatch logs on so you can actually see what's going on inside the pipeline. If you want to deploy your infrastructure, of course, you're going to have code deploy. It's not included today, but just something to point out. And then to tie this all together, you run this with CodePipeline. So this is my repository looks like. Very simple. Kept it very simple today. So I've got, of course, a README, very simple. Bucket is my YAML file that declares this S3 bucket I'll be standing up. And then waivers.rego, just so I can show you how Fugue can be flexible to your needs. So you don't always need to follow all of our rules if they don't fit your business needs, right? So what we'll do is we'll declare it in CloudFormation. We'll make a code build step. I've actually made 2 steps today. So one to scan it prior to deployment, and then with a notional deployment, then we'll scan our runtime cloud infrastructure using my AWS environment in Fugue. And then finally, we'll wrap that all up in a pipeline. So without further ado, we'll get into the demo. Okay, move over to my VS Code. So let's get into what I have here. So we'll start with my bucket.yaml. So when you're looking for how to go stand up cloud infrastructure, you can obviously, some people have internal repositories with these templates that you can use, and you can't always be sure if they're secure or not. So what I pulled here today is actually from the AWS CloudFormation documentation. So from a reputable source, I pulled this YAML file, and obviously anything commented out, I've made some changes to it. But the point is that you really can't trust any of these templates that you find. And while it may be encouraged to kind of, for lack of a better term, plagiarize, this cloud infrastructure. It's not advised unless you scan it with a tool like Fugue. So to get started is very easy. So we'll be using Regula, which is the Fugue open source IaC scanning tool. And then because I have a Fugue account, which is what Fugue customers have, I have an API ID and secret that I've pulled into this environment, and it'll pull in the additional compliance family mappings. So if you use Regula, you get our rules, but you're not going to get the compliance family mappings. So I've declared in my Fugue environment, I'll show you here. So in this middle Fugue environment, I've got SOC 2 applied. So it'll pull in the entire SOC 2 family and run those rules against what I have in this repository. So getting started with Regula is very easy. You can do a brew install and then later on a brew upgrade. If you're a Mac user, we have pre-built binaries for all your major platforms. And then for running it in the CI/CD pipeline tool, for example, you can also use the Regula Docker image. So right now we're on version 2.5. We are always updating that. And yeah, I'll get into it. So getting started, we wanted to make using Regula very easy. We don't want you to have to run a lot of, add a lot of flags to using Regula. So to go recursively throughout, as you saw, everything that I have in this repository, all you have to execute is Regula run. And then so you're going to get a couple messages that appear, and I'll blow this up a little bit so we can read them. So use the config file. So I'll show you that. So .regula.yaml is my config file. So it's got my Fugue environment ID, and then I could set different parameters for how I want Regula to be run. Regula run on its own is meant to be very easy, very quick. But if you, for example, have like a lot of things that Regula might think are infrastructure as code files, you can declare different paths. You can exclude some certain things. You can always sync your infrastructure with the Fugue platform, as I've done. And then, of course, you can include things like waivers, which I'll show you, and custom rules. So I'll get out of the YAML file and I'll show you what we have. So it requests a rule bundle from the Fugue UI. So it actually communicates with this here, finds that I want SOC 2 to be applied. So it'll pull that. It'll check to see if there are any custom rules. And then tomorrow it's going to check to see if there are any waivers. So we come out with release every 2 weeks. And tomorrow you're going to be able to actually pull waivers down for resources and have them waived locally as well. So that central source of truth will be the Fugue platform. So the results we have are displayed here on screen. So you've got a Fugue rule ID that starts off each violation. You've got a description of that Fugue rule ID. You've got the severity that's been set by Fugue using these compliance families, so SOC 2. You've got probably the most pivotal piece here is our documentation, and I'll get into that in a second. And then finally, Fugue's going to tell you where this occurred. So the S3 bucket that's been declared in bucket.yaml line 2, right? So you have this S3 bucket, and you need to go fix it using this Fugue documentation. So again, it's not enough that we tell you what's wrong with your environment, but we also need to tell you to be an effective tool, how to go fix it. So I'll get into that here. So I'll open up Fugue Rule 229's documentation. And so as you can see, and I'll blow this up so that everyone can see if you're on a small screen. So we have a couple options for remediation steps. So again, we have single rules that apply across the entire software development lifecycle. And we also have remediation steps for the same. So it begins with AWS console. Looks like 7 steps in the AWS console to go make this secure. You also have a CLI option that you can use the AWS CLI to go modify this bucket. And then finally, you have your infrastructure as code. So we begin with CloudFormation. So I've got your JSON options, YAML options for CloudFormation, and then Terraform HCL code. So things that you can include in your Terraform HCL code. So we give you plenty of options. And then this one here should look very familiar, because as we get back into my VS Code and I reduce the terminal, we'll see that this just needs to be updated here. So I will uncomment all of these, save the file, and you'll see that this is all very easy to put in place. So I execute regular run again, and now I'm just down to one problem. The issue with everything you've seen me do to this point is that it's all optional. It's all voluntary. As a proactive step. Oh, Siri just, sorry, I just had Siri talk to me. So this is all voluntary. Anything you've seen has been proactive on my part. And as your teams grow, you need to automate this, right? So trust but verify means adding this as a pipeline step in some sort of CI/CD pipeline tool. And so we'll do that. So I'm going to add my bucket and I'll commit it. And I'll say known bad commit, so that you can see that the power of Fugue is that you can stop a pipeline because of a bad commit. And then finally, I'll push it to my AWS code commit repository. And so I'll go over there and show you that. So in code commit, I have this repository. You can see that I've got the latest commit reflected here. So I've got Fugue rule 229 satisfied, but Fugue rule 99 is still in violation. And then while the pipeline spins up, I'll show you how I've built it. I'm gonna refresh this. So again, I've got two build steps here today. So two build projects. So you've got Regular, and I'll show you the spec for that. So the build spec, you can declare this using a build spec file. So this is something I tested just for this use case, prefer using just a build command that I can put directly into the AWS console here. But you can declare it as a build spec YAML file that looks exactly like this. And so all we're going to do is we're going to grab the latest version of Regula from the GitHub page for regula.dev, and I'll show you that. So you go to our GitHub page, you find right now what it's doing is finding our latest version of Regula, pulling that, extracting it, moving it to where we need it to be, and then executing Regula. And so you'll notice when I was running it locally, I did Regula run, but now I got a couple more things here. So I'll walk through those. So Regula run, and then I set a severity. So you can, for like low and medium severity rules, maybe you don't want to break a build for business critical things that you need in the cloud. So you can set a severity, and it's going to only enforce rules that are equal to or greater than that severity. So I think my severity, and I'll go check this right now, is medium. Got all sorts of screen issues with this screen right now, so please be patient. Okay. Edit environment. So I've got environment variables set, and I've got severity as medium. So it's only going to fail the build if medium or higher violation occurs. So that's what we'll see. And so the next step that you'll see is the runtime. So once something is actually deployed, if you use the code deploy deployment step, that only is executed if Regula is run. Then once it's deployed successfully, then you execute a runtime scan. And so you got a couple options for this, as with anything in these CI/CD pipelines. I use the Fugue API. We've got a first-class API that you just declare your environment ID. This can also be an environment variable. For today, just for expediency, I declared it as directly hard-coded in it. And then you give your client ID and secret to this build step. And so I'll show you what the whole pipeline looks like put together. So code pipeline, and we're going to see that it failed. So lunch and learn pipeline. So it pulls from the source and it notices when there's a new commit, obviously, and then it moves on to build. And then if I were to pass build, then it would go to runtime scan. And it looks like I configured this incorrectly for today, but you can obviously with any CI/CD pipeline tool, make it so that steps are dependent on one another. So I'll show you what the details look like. And so we're going to go to the link to the execution details and notice that you're able to actually see what happened in the build. And this is why I recommend ensuring you have CloudWatch logs turned on when you set up your pipeline. So there's some preparation steps that happen. And then obviously you pull this latest version of Regula. And then just as we saw in my VS Code, Fugue rule 99 is in violation. And then I added this bucket, committed it and pushed it. And so that's what you'll see here. And so this is what your developers will see, right? So as they're writing their application code and they're doing any other SAST testing, then you can also ensure that they run for their infrastructure to go run this application, include Regula, execute a scan of their infrastructure as code, just as you would for your code and your open source and your container. And then this is what they would see. And they would have this link for use to go into the Fugue rules documentation, fix whatever they need to fix, conduct another scan, and all you really have to do is retry the build after recommitting that file, and then move on with the pipeline. So when we talk about developer-friendly tools, Fugue at no point has pushed you into the Fugue platform, right? This is obviously a place where you can go interact as a developer or as a manager, maybe with our reports, for example. But at no point have we forced you into any tool that you're not already using. So you're already using VS Code integration, right? You're already using AWS Code Commit, Code Pipeline, Code Build, GitLab, Jenkins, Bitbucket. You get the point. And we're bringing Fugue to you so that you can move securely but quickly in the cloud. So the most pivotal piece here is this produces non-zero exit code. Stops the build, and then if I had configured the second step correctly, it would have not let it get to a runtime scan. Doesn't hurt to do a runtime scan, and you can see that our scans are very quick. Right now I have 12:27 Eastern, and it looks like it actually didn't. It just did the cleanup for that build. But if it had made it, and which I'll show you in a second, it would have been updated as it was before. But the last piece of this particular code build, and I'll show you what the line is here. So upload. So when you're running this locally, you notice that I was just executing regular run, and because in my regular config file I had sync equals true, it was pulling in that rule bundle. You can execute it, so you're just using the open source. But the final flag you can use is upload. So I'll show you what that means. So upload is actually going to upload the rule results of these scans to Fugue. And so let's go see that, because this is friendly for some people. But if you're someone who wants to monitor your developers who are embracing this tool and see what kind of scans they're conducting and the results of those scans, you can go to the Fugue console. And so I'll go to this lunch and learn pipeline, and you'll see that this last scan was conducted 12:22 p.m. and I am not compliant. And so here's where you'll see that. So Fugue rule 229, because we fixed it, it was evaluated for Fugue rule 229 and it passed. But for Fugue rule 99, it was not passed. And so you can go in our documentation from here as well. It'll open it up, show you the different compliance families that are mapped here. And then of course, bring you to the remediation steps that we saw before. And the final piece of the Fugue platform I want to show you here from an IaC point of view is the visualizer. So if you have extensive, and this is very small compared to production infrastructure that somebody might be standing up with IaC, but you can go interact with these files or with the results of the scans of these files in your Fugue console. So where maybe to a security engineer or someone who's not always in infrastructure as code, interacting in the terminal might not be ideal. So all you do is click on the thing that's clearly wrong, your red triangle, and it's going to show you, hey, Fugue Rule 99 violation. This is a high severity violation, and because of this, we're not compliant with SOC 2, so we won't pass our audit. Right. So it wraps it up here for you in a very fun to use way, and easy to use way. So we'll wrap this up. I'll go fix these issues. So we'll say hide this. So using this documentation, I have added the proper steps for Fugue Rule 99. I'll save it. So I've declared that this bucket should only be accessed with the KMS key. I'll execute regular run one more time. No problems found. So we're fully compliant with the SOC 2 compliance family for this bucket. And now that we are, and now that I've seen it in my CI/CD pipeline, where I'm wrong and how I can go fix it, I have fixed it. And so I'll add bucket.yaml, commit, known good commit. I'll push it to my code commit repository, and we'll go back. And it's going to be updated here just so we can see. So we've got Fugue Rule 99 has been satisfied. We've applied server-side encryption, and then Fugue Rule 229, we've blocked public access. Let's say, for example, just to move back to waivers, and I'll show you while this pipeline runs. If you did want public access for this S3 bucket, let's say, for example, you have you host images, and you have people that need to be able to access those. So you drop them in an S3 bucket. You can make it publicly accessible, whether by a waiver locally, which is what I'll show you in VS Code. So you just declare the resource ID and the rule ID, and you're able to waive. And this is the Rego language. And then Rego is Fugue is going to take that in, apply this waiver to that resource ID only. You're also able to disable rules altogether. This is all done locally. And then if you did want to include that, then you could. But of course, again, as of tomorrow, you'll be able to go into the Fugue console, the Fugue UI, click in here, and we're going to have a waiver button, and you're going to be able to apply that waiver to either this bucket or buckets with certain tags, et cetera, right? So you can control this by saying for buckets with tags that say publicly accessible equals true, then this Fugue Rule 229 will be waived. So let's go over to the code pipeline and see what's going on. So the pipeline's in progress right now. So I'll open this up. So it passed this build. So we see no problems found, much better. So we see that there's agreement between what I had locally. When I executed regular run, see, no problems found. And then when we get back into the pipeline, it will have run. So it pulls that, or sorry, it's not pulling, it's posting with the API to go execute this, this runtime scan. And so we can see that in the Fugue console. And of course, again, I didn't deploy that today, but you could add with AWS code deploy after code build or after these secure steps and actually deploy your infrastructure to the AWS cloud. And then once it's deployed, again, you see that there's a scan in progress and you'd be able to see, I believe this is US East 2, you'd be able to see that there's an S3 bucket here in addition, and it's my lunch and learn bucket. So that's how you automate from end to end, from infrastructure as code through CI/CD into the cloud runtime securely the whole way. in tools that developers are actually using, and then also be able to have that insight as a manager of developers, the results of these scans. So that's about all I have. These scans take up to 15 minutes. I don't want to have everyone just sitting around here watching this. They're usually a lot quicker than 15 minutes, but that is what we quote. So Drew, are there any questions I can answer?
Yeah, and I wanted to kick it off with one that we're seeing more and more with organizations is organizations that have a mix of both Terraform and CloudFormation in use. It might be as a result of M&A activity, or just different teams are empowered to kind of make their own tooling decisions. Can you talk about how Fugue IaC security can work in kind of a multi-IaC environment, and how the rules might apply? Are they the same rules?
Sure. Yeah. And it's a great question. So yeah, I think M&A is a great example of that, right? You get two different development teams standing up different infrastructure with different IaC tools. And you don't want to make somebody change, and because that's a lot of rework that maybe not be necessary. So when you execute Regula, as you see on the screen, and we blow up the text here a little bit, it doesn't discern any, it doesn't go for any specific, we don't need you to declare that, just look for CloudFormation YAML files. It'll search through the entire repository recursively for any infrastructure as code files that are supported. So whether you have a mix of CloudFormation YAML and JSON and Terraform HCL code, and then a full Terraform JSON plan that's been, of course, stitched together. And then also your Kubernetes YAML manifest and your Azure Resource Manager JSON templates. Regula is going to search through all of those, and it's going to be with the same rules. So if you're standing up an S3 bucket with Terraform HCL code, we scan with the exact same rule, that Fugue rule 99 or 229, whichever one it was. Luckily, I don't have to memorize these. It'll search for that with that same rule declared in the same language, Rego, for those resource types, and ensure that you're compliant with that rule. That answer the question, Drew?
Yep, I think so. So we have a couple questions here, kind of a multi-part from Thomas, and we could probably kind of tag team this. I think I can take some of it. The first is, do you offer a data asset related handling like financial healthcare data stored in S3, along with data protection laws like GDPR? And not heard of the second one, 152-FC RU. I don't know.
I've not heard of that one either.
Hey, Thomas, let us know what that second one is. Oh, it's for Russia. Okay. So do you want to handle kind of, I know, Fugue is primarily looking at the configuration of the cloud resources, the infrastructure resources, not the actual data itself. So, regulations like GDPR and HIPAA do apply in the Fugue use case, but not necessarily as it pertains to the actual data that's in those resources. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah. So the way Fugue would play a role in that. So like Amazon Macy is searching for sensitive private data in your infrastructure, or in the files that are in your cloud, right? So we don't do that. But what you can use Fugue for is ensure that Amazon Macy is always, or AWS Macy is always turned on, and that it is configured the way that you want it to be configured, that you have CloudWatch, CloudTrail all turned on, configured correctly. And then it sets your infrastructure to be compliant with these compliance families, right? So again, we're not looking through anything other than the configuration status of your environment. But as Drew will tell you, that's where a lot of these hacks come in, right? Is with improperly declared infrastructure. So as long as you get the infrastructure side right, and then you have those tools that come standard with AWS or any of these other tools to search for sensitive data and make sure that it's not in the wrong places. That's where that's how I'd approach it. And then for the compliance family side, on the screen it shows all the compliance families that we have standard with Fugue. Drew?
Yep. Okay, and then the second part of his question pertains to kind of protection against ransomware attacks. Maybe I'll take a first stab at this. So on its face, we're not seeing ransomware attacks being executed against cloud environments like they are being executed against kind of data center IT infrastructure and data. I suspect the reason for that is the simplicity for creating kind of data backups, replication in cloud environments, and just kind of making that a part of your cloud infrastructure. So if an attacker is able to get into your cloud environment and you've done some, it's well architected environment, you're producing those snapshots and securing the location of those snapshots. So if an attacker is able to get into your database and encrypt it, you've got backups. So there's not really a ransom to be had because you can restore the function of that application, that data. But I would say that the methods, if an attacker wanted to execute a ransomware attack or a data breach and just steal your data, they're going to follow some of the same patterns to get access to that data initially, whether it's to lock it up in some way or just steal it. And that's primarily the pattern we see with pretty much every single cloud breach that hits the news that we can analyze. Is sort of three phases, I guess. You've got your initial resource misconfiguration that hackers can find using automated tools. And those can get that hacker kind of an initial successful penetration into your environment, kind of get you a foothold in the environment. And then what we see is they, might leverage the API keys on that resource, start operating against your cloud control plane to do things like discover additional knowledge about your environment, where your S3 buckets are, those kinds of things. And then begin to kind of move laterally, kind of rinse and repeat, get onto another resource, leverage those API keys and privileges and access policies to ultimately get at that data and then extract it, maybe execute an S3, sync command to sync that data into their environment right out from under your nose. So that's really the kind of the danger that we see. The pathway between ransomware and kind of a data breach might look the same, but the end result tends to be different in the cloud and not resulting in ransomware, but just resulting in actually stealing the data. So I hope that helps. And I think from that perspective, Fugue is going to not only help you prevent these kinds of misconfigurations from being deployed, but as we all know, in the cloud, everything is really mutable, highly dynamic. So those misconfigurations do have a nasty tendency to kind of slip past CI/CD pipelines. You might have engineers kind of making changes in the console, these kinds of things. So it's really critical to catch these in the runtime environment, not just solely rely on IaC checks or CI/CD guardrails to catch those. You definitely want to do that. You're going to make your lives a whole lot easier and reduce your risk, but you also, can't ever really turn your back on the runtime. So you want to catch those individual resources, and you also want to identify these kind of deeper architectural vulnerabilities that can enable a hacker, once they've gotten a foothold in your environment, from really expanding the blast radius of that initial exploit and turning it into a major breach. Things like, list S3 on a EC2 instance, or overly permissive IAM roles and policies. Those are the kinds of things that you really need to keep an eye out for to ultimately protect your data in the cloud. So, Aidan, I'm starting to ramble. Do you want to add that? I know you're showing the Fugue visualization here.
I could never hope to give a better answer than that, but I just want to give an example of that. So back in December, I was working with some declaring some Google Cloud infrastructure with Terraform. And when I scanned it with Regula, there are no issues detected, because you could see it's pretty simple infrastructure. There's not a whole lot going on here. You've got a service account, and there's very little going on. But then once I Terraform planned and applied it, then Google took that and found that I hadn't explicitly declared the network that I wanted, the subnets. It stood up all of this insecure infrastructure, and it's so bad. Look at it, right? So, and this is default, right? So you click into this, and our rule, Fugue rule 402. This always makes me laugh. The default network for a project should be deleted. So yeah, it's not enough just to scan your IaC. I don't want to trick anybody into thinking that, if you get it right when it's deployed, then you're good, because clearly, it was full speed ahead with IaC scanning. And then once I declared this infrastructure and I wasn't very explicit, Google took some implicit things and 29 subnets that are just not great. So just an example of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. As much as we love empowering developers with IaC security, and it really is important to do that, as well as catching things in CI/CD. When a developer is using IaC to kind of express a cloud environment, they tend to be only including those attributes that matter to them to make their application work. And the cloud provider is going to fill in a lot of configuration details and defaults and those kinds of things. And a lot of times those defaults are not necessarily secure in your use case. So it's, and the other issue is IaC tends to be broken out into modules. And oftentimes, particularly when you get into those kind of resource graph vulnerabilities that involve multiple resources, those kinds of vulnerabilities may not reveal themselves until that infrastructure environment is full and in context, and you can evaluate it in such. So, there's a number of reasons why it's absolutely critical to evaluate the runtime environment, in addition to doing these kind of preventive measures to prevent deployment of these vulnerabilities.
Right, and you bring up modules. That's another great example that you can. All you have to do is provide some preferences in the modules. Again, talking about blindly trusting something you pull off the internet. I found on the internet, so it must be true and secure, right? You have to execute this in a pipeline, and you have to check it once Terraform init has been called, so that your infrastructure, the modules have been pulled in, and then ideally when Terraform plan has been called. And so doing it in a pipeline and doing it in an automated way where you can find the whole picture, and then at the end, once it is deployed, scanning it again once it's in the cloud. So
yep, that's definitely the best practice. So a couple more questions here. Do you push Open Policy Agent? The answer is yes. We love Open Policy Agent. It's what Regula was built on top of. We kind of took Open Policy Agent and just made it a little bit easier to use for infrastructure as code security checks. And it's kind of the foundation of our unified policy engine for both IaC and runtime security. We love it. And this is a great segue to another question from Thomas, which is, how does Snyk integrate with Fugue? Snyk is also a big user of OPA, Open Policy Agent. So that's one of many synergies that we have with Snyk. Currently, Fugue and Snyk are not integrated. The acquisition is just a couple weeks old, but we're super excited about where it's headed. The product and engineering teams are working hard and fast on building out that integration and what it's going to look like. What I will say is an investment in Fugue now and an investment in building solutions for your use cases in the cloud using Fugue will be an investment in the future of developer first cloud security with Snyk in the long run. So we're not going to pull out anything from under you that you've already built with Fugue. We're just going to be adding more capabilities in the near term and down the road as Fugue gets integrated into the overall Sneak developer platform. From a vision perspective, I'll stay high level, but I think what you're going to find with Fugue and kind of the integration with Sneak in the long run is clear line of sight from the application down through the infrastructure from a security perspective. And that's going to be critically important, because when we, again, talk about those initial penetration events into your cloud environment, sometimes those come from application level CVEs and other kind of vulnerabilities. So it's in the cloud, it's really critical to, from a security perspective, to start letting go of this idea that you have this very hard boundary between the application and the infrastructure. That boundary, by and large, is getting really blurry. In really cloud native applications such as serverless or Kubernetes containers, that application boundary is largely disappearing. So that vision really is a developer first cloud security approach, and really just getting that clear line of sight between the application and the infrastructure to really protect your environment and your data. So hopefully, Thomas, that answered your question. And it doesn't appear we have any more questions. So why don't we go ahead and wrap? Thank you, Thomas. Really appreciate the interaction there. So again, with Fugue, you can get started for free. We have an enterprise free trial. Fugue will give you a complete security and compliance assessment of your environment in 15 minutes, pointed at your cloud. Go get coffee, come back and review the results. We're going to give you remediation feedback, that interactive map of your environment, so you can kind of visually reveal issues that you might have missed before. And if you want to schedule a one-on-one session with Aidan or one of our folks on our customer success team, we invite you to do that. We'll kind of dig into your use case, your challenges, and show you how Fugue can help you achieve your goals. And we've got a number of educational resources on our site. The one we've got up here is the State of Cloud Security 2021. There's also the Engineer's Handbook on Cloud Security. Thank you, Sivia, for posting that link there. Jump on that, really chock full of actionable insights and information that you can use to move faster and more securely in the cloud. So with that, I think we can wrap. Hey, Sivia.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And please reach out to fugue.co if you have any additional questions. Yep. Take care and have a great afternoon.
Yep. Thanks, Aidan. Thanks, Sivia. Thanks, everybody, for coming by. Appreciate it.